Next on our list is to make the roulade for our decorated sponge. It's very similar process to making a genoise or any other egg foam based cake. You want to start by whipping your egg whites and sugar, a little bit of the sugar, until it's nice and thick and lightened in color. So I've already been whipping these for about 5 minutes, maybe 6. You can see how it's leaving a bit of a trail as the whip is running around, and it's nice and thick. So you want to make sure that your egg yolks are done first. I'm going to turn this off. And then you want to wash out the bowl. So put this into something else if you don't have 2 KitchenAid bowls, which most people don't. Just make sure you wash it out. And then we're going to start whipping our whites. I'm going to put our whites on the machine. So put your whites in the machine and then start whipping, gradually moving up the speed, 20 or 30 seconds at a time. Maybe start on speed 3 or 4. And what we're trying to do is build a stable foam by build up lots of little bubbles and then build into bigger bubbles as the speed increases. Remember, when whipping egg whites, everything needs to be very, very clean and grease-free. So your bowl, no egg yolks in the whites, everything needs to be nice and clean. So we're just going to keep whipping until we have a nice base of foam. Then I'm going to increase the speed and I'm going to start streaming in the sugar slowly. You can probably see how my egg whites are starting to get a little bit foamy, but I can still see on the bottom some just straight liquid egg white. So I want to make sure the whole mixture looks foamy before I start adding my egg whites or my sugar. There we go. Now the whole mixture has a good base of bubbles. There's no liquid egg white separated on the bottom. So I'm going to turn it up one more. I'm going to sprinkle in just a tiny bit of the sugar. And I'm going to turn it up one more. Add just a tiny bit more sugar. And I'm going to turn it all the way. Oh, I am at this top speed. So now that it's at top speed, I want to start adding the sugar just a little bit at a time until I get some nice medium peaks. You don't want to over whip it and you don't want to under whip it. The purpose of adding the sugar so slowly is to help it dissolve in the egg whites while not deflating the foam that you've created. So now I'm going to check my whites. They're looking pretty good, but I want to see a nice medium peak. So the best way to do that is to give it a bit of a swirl and then flip it over. So I can see here how it's got a nice curve. It's hard to hold it upside down. This is exactly what I'm looking for. If it looped all the way around and touched itself again, that would be soft peak. And if it didn't have this little bend on it, that would be stiff peak. But because I've got a little bit of a bend, I'm actually in the perfect spot. Push the KitchenAid out of the way here. So now what we have to do is combine the ingredients together. So we are going to fold in a third of the whites into the yolks. Let's start this way. So I'm just going to take a little bit. I'm going to pop it in, and then I'm just going to fold. And be really careful here to fold gently. You don't want to destroy all of the foam that you've made with both the yolks and the whites. The point of this first third is to lighten the mixture and make it easier for you to fold in the rest. And once I have it, I would say 75 or 80% of the way in, I have a few white streaks left behind, but I don't have any really big chunks. I'm going to add the rest of the egg whites. At this point, you want to make sure everything is ready to go. You want to make sure that your oven was preheated, that your pan is ready. Everything you need is right in front of you. There's no leavening agent in this sponge cake except for the egg foam. So there's no baking powder, no baking soda. The only thing that's going to cause this cake to rise is the egg whites. So you really want to make sure that it's not sitting around waiting for you to get a pan ready or any of those things. So make sure everything's good to go first. And then again, gently fold it in. So I'm looking for it to be, again, 75–80% of the way folded in. And I would say I'm there now. I have a few white streaks, but I don't have any big lumps of egg. And then what we're going to do is we're going to fold in the flour. I like to do this in the same system, sort of 1/3 of the flour, which I've already sifted. And I like to get it 75–80% of the way in. And then I like to add the rest. So once I don't see any massive dry streaks, I'm going to add the rest of the flour. So that same sort of lift from the bottom, fold it over the top while I turn the bowl. I go around and around in circles. And you can see once you add the flour, it starts deflating your cake mix a little bit because it's heavy. So you want to make sure that you're really good technique here, just folding over, not stirring, not smooshing the eggs up against the side of the bowl. Just let them fold over onto themselves. Once you've got that all the way in, we're going to add our oil. And the easiest way to do this, I've added my vanilla to the oil, just so I had one less container. You want to add a little bit of cake mix to the oil. And you want to pretty aggressively stir that together. So temper those two things together. This will make it easier for you to combine with the rest of the mix. So I've got that pretty aggressively stirred together. Don't have any big trails of oil left behind. So now that I've added the oil to this part, I'm going to add it back to the cake mix now. And same technique, fold. You want to fold that all the way through. There we go. So that's all mixed up. I'm going to pop to the freezer, grab out my decorated tray, and then we'll come back and finish. So I've taken my tray out of the freezer now. Everything is nice and frozen. And now again, you have to work quickly. We're going to pour our roulade mix along the length of the tray first and go from end to end, sort of back and forth. You always want to start with the length of a tray and then worry about the width after. So I'm going to try and even it out sort of along the length as best I can. There we go. And now we're going to use our offset spatula to level it out. And you need to work relatively quickly. So you're going to take your offset and we're going to work on the length of the pan first, and then I'll work on the width. So I'm just going to gently sort of push it back and forth, and I don't ever really pick up my spatula. I leave my spatula to the cake batter if I can. Just sort of spread it gently. And now I'm going to start working my way back and forth on the sides. I'm backing up and down the line and to the sides. You need to work as quickly as you can as to not deflate the batter too much, but it is really important that you get this nice and level. So if you pick up your spatula a lot, you're going to get sort of this wrinkle and you really don't want that. So keep your spatula down and just lightly press it to the cake batter all the way around into all of the corners. I can see this corner's a little bit low, so I just want to work a little bit more batter into that corner so it doesn't burn. And then you want to take one really great look at it. Find holding it up to eye level is super helpful. So you want to look at it from every angle, see if you have any low spots. And if you do, you want to correct those quickly. But other than that, we're going to put this in a 400-degree oven, and it's not going to take very long, 7-10 minutes. And we're hoping that it's going to be spongy in the center with a clean pick. Okay, so into the oven, and I'll give you a second and I'll show you what that looks like. So the roulades come out of the oven. Mine was about 8 minutes, but yours might vary depending on your oven. You can see it's very, very pale golden all the way around, but when I touch it, it bounces back a little bit. So I did a test earlier and I can see right where my fingerprint was, and it wasn't quite ready. So my fingerprint didn't come back, but now when I touch it, it doesn't deflate underneath my finger, which means it's baked all the way through. So what we want to do is we want to cool this until it's room temperature. So as it's cooling, if you throw a nice clean towel over top of it or something so it doesn't dry out, that would be great. But don't put any saran wrap or plastic on top because it'll make it sweaty and sticky. So just put it to the side, let it come to room temperature, and we'll move on to the next thing. Now that our roulade is cooled down to room temperature, what we want to do is we want to get it out of the pan, and we want to remove the paper off the backing. So you're just going to take a knife and gently run it around the edges just to make sure that your cake is loosened. And then you're going to put a piece of paper just on top, and then take a second tray and sandwich it and then flip the whole thing over. Now you're going to get to see your masterpiece. So you're going to get rid of the tray, and then we're going to pull the paper away from the edges. And you want to give it a little bit of support because you don't want to leave your design behind on the paper. So put a little downward pressure, kind of spin it around, pull towards me. There we go. So here we have our cake. It's all decorated and ready to go. The last thing we want to do is we need to flip it over one more time. So I'm going to take my tray, and I just flip this piece of paper over so that the sticky side of the paper is facing up and the cleaner side of the paper is facing the design. And now, not into the pan, but on top of the pan. I want to flip it one more time. So I'm going to flip it over, remove this piece of paper, and we're ready to go and roll it up. So I'm just going to make the filling, and then we'll come back and finish this part.